My name's Mark Glenton. I'm a mental health specialist. I've been on a journey and I want to share my journey with you. Firstly, I was a theatre nurse. I worked several years as a theatre nurse before ill health and disabilities started to affect me. I started to suffer with long-term chronic migraines, which led to dizziness and collapses, which often I would just fall at a short notice. But as a consequence, this led to me losing my nursing registration, so I was no longer employed. When you lose your independence, things happen like it affects your mental health, it affects your moods, and my moods started to dip and they started to swing to and fro. I tried lots of different medication, but none of that actually helped me. My children that were on the autism spectrum didn't understand what was going on. All they could see was what the behaviours I was showing, which is not very good for their mental well-being either. I became angry and depressed, and I started to shout a lot and see myself as a failure. It's quite a common thing that people feel. And when I was shouting at other people, it was only from my point of view. I was unable to cope with the fact that I could no longer work and I was now disabled. My depression increased, and as did my mood swings. They started to increase all the time, and the more they increased, the more I started to cry and shout. I reached out to the doctors, but they just prescribed me different tablets, which to me didn't help. I was on benefits. This led to financial pressures and my home actually being repossessed. I was sent for things like therapy and counselling, holistic therapies, acupuncture, loads of different treatments, none of which helped because they didn't tell me how to deal with the pain and the training and the collapsing and the dizziness or being disabled. They actually suggested I should go to anger management, which not helpful because it's not the cause of the situation. The collapsing became more frequent and I would often injure myself, and this led to my anxiety increasing, and it stopped me from doing anything because I was at risk of hurting myself. If I was to go out and push myself, the chances are I would fall and hurt myself. And I didn't want that, so I had that anxiety, that fear going, no, I can't do that, I've got to stop what I'm doing. And this led to me getting worse. And as a consequence to that, my marriage split up. Thankfully, and I'm grateful for this now, I still get to see my children on a regular basis. But at the time, I was suicidal. I was depressed. It all got too much for me and my head was going like this. And I didn't think there was anything that I could do, and I blame myself for everything, especially when my daughter had to go to therapy. So my anxiety and my depression was increasing, and that affected my eating. So I'd eat or not eat or binge eat junk food, and pile on the weight and become diabetic. But I was also anxious and stressed that I'd never be in an intimate relationship again, and I'd never work again, and this will be it forever, and that would be it. But it's not the case, because there was a time I went on a respite holiday with my children, and the children suffered a family loss, and I was torn at how I could help them. But one of the therapists actually took me aside and said, we're looking after the children, let's take some time for you. And she came along and she just chatted to me like a human being. She made me feel welcomed and valued, like I was actually someone. And with that one chat, I didn't feel like a failure anymore. But I began to accept the things that have happened to me were not actually my fault, just things that were out of my control. So when I actually learned about being in the power of my surroundings and being in the moment, and the fact that I could take some time for myself to use things like gratitude lists and achievement lists and what's in my control, no matter how small they are, things started to change. I actually gathered a sense of hope. something that I'd not felt for in years. And I'd often ask myself if this was in my control, or if it was not in my control. And with various breathing techniques, I started to learn to be able to master my depression and my anxiety. I went on a life coaching course and was amazed by how simple the actions were and how effective they actually were. I went through mental health therapist training, inspired me to become a master neuro-linguistic program and hypnotic practitioner, and that's a mouthful, isn't it? Using all the skills they taught me, but based on those initial steps. I still have my physical issues, but I've developed the strategies to deal with those problems. And there will always be things for me to work on, but I can assure you now that I am no longer depressed, I'm no longer suicidal, I'm no longer anxious. And my aim is to help others, just like somebody was there for me. Sometimes it just takes a different perspective and a different understanding, and it will make all the difference.